About 55 miles west of Mexico City lies a prison considered the most secure and heavily guarded in all of Mexico, Altiplano Prison. Surrounded by towering concrete walls and barbed wire, the prison is tightly monitored year-round by thousands of guards. Surveillance cameras inside each cell monitor inmates 24/7, while the airspace around the prison is a no-fly zone, and mobile signals are completely jammed. The security is so intense that it's deemed an escape-proof facility. But in 2014, someone quietly broke out of this maximum security prison. That person was none other than Mexico's infamous drug lord Joaquín Guzmán Loera, better known as El Chapo, the Shorty. He was one of the world's most powerful drug kingpins and also among the wealthiest people on earth. Back in 2001, he had already escaped from another high-security prison named Puente Grande. For the next 13 years, he stayed on the run and managed to avoid arrest. Determined to prevent the godfather of the drug world from ever escaping again, the Mexican government placed him in the inescapable Altiplano prison, while adding even more layers of security. The government firmly believed that the country's most dangerous criminal had been locked inside the strongest cage possible, watched around the clock, and destined to die behind bars. But just 1 year later, that confidence, along with Altiplano's elite security measures, became a global embarrassment. Mexico's most fortified prison had been breached, and an unbroken record of 0 escapes was shattered. Under constant camera surveillance, and right under the noses of the guards, El Chapo vanished from his cell. The world's most powerful drug trafficker had pulled off another jaw-dropping prison escape, and the haunting question remained: how did he manage to get out under such intense security? And why was the United States more desperate to capture him than even Mexico itself? What exactly is the full story behind El Chapo's notorious life? El Chapo was born in 1957 in a rural village called La Tuna, located in Sinaloa State, Mexico. His family was extremely poor, surviving mainly through farming. It's said his father even grew opium poppies. Whatever little money they made, his father would waste on alcohol and pleasures, and he was also physically abusive toward the family. Because of his father's destructive habits, their financial situation kept deteriorating. As the eldest of 7 siblings, El Chapo dropped out of school in 3rd grade and took on the burden of supporting his family. He sold oranges, did odd jobs in the forest, and from a young age, one thing stuck in his mind: he would make money at all costs. That hunger for wealth quickly pulled him into a life of crime. By the age of 15, he and his cousins had started cultivating marijuana. This work became the first stepping stone in his pursuit of wealth. He believed that getting rich through illegal means was possible, but how much can someone from a tiny village really grow? To make a name for himself in the criminal world and build his fortune, he left his hometown and even ditched the name his parents gave him, Joaquín Arturo Guzmán Loera, and took on the nickname El Chapo, Shorty, a name locals gave him because of his short stature. No one could have imagined that this nickname would one day become one of the most feared names in criminal history. After leaving home, El Chapo began his criminal career as a hitman for hire, ready to kill for just a small payout. His brutal nature quickly drew attention. In the late 1970s, drug lord Héctor Luis Palma recruited him into the Guadalajara cartel, then the largest criminal organization in Mexico. El Chapo was assigned to oversee the drug transportation route between Sinaloa and the U.S.-Mexico border. He was fiercely strict. Even minor delays in shipments could lead to him executing key members of his own group. Fueled by ambition and greed, the cartel's operations expanded rapidly. By 1980, his capabilities were widely recognized, and he was introduced to cartel boss Miguel Ángel Felix Gallardo, who later gave him full control over logistics. From that point forward, El Chapo managed nearly every detail of the cartel's drug smuggling operations. The Guadalajara cartel had grown into a well-oiled criminal machine, thriving both in Mexico and the U.S. But in 1989, disaster struck. Gallardo was arrested for murdering a DEA agent, leading to the cartel's collapse into multiple factions. Seizing the opportunity, El Chapo teamed up with other traffickers in northwest Mexico to form his own group, the Sinaloa Cartel. Thanks to his deep knowledge of every part of the smuggling process, building his own empire wasn't difficult. In the years that followed, while rival cartels were choked off by tighter border control, El Chapo kept innovating his smuggling methods. Sometimes he hid drugs inside fire extinguishers, or packed them into cans of dried goods, always managing to outwit authorities. Beyond that, he pioneered a unique method of transportation, building sophisticated tunnels near the US-Mexico border. These tunnels stretched for miles and came equipped with ventilation systems, lighting, and even rail cars. At the time, most drug lords relied on roads, air, or sea routes heavily patrolled and vulnerable, leading to many cartel busts. As for El Chapo, he primarily used underground tunnels for transportation, allowing him to avoid all surveillance. And just like that, his business kept growing. Through his network, he began smuggling tons of cocaine from Colombia and Mexico into the United States. His drug cartel wasn't just trafficking cocaine, it also produced and distributed methamphetamine, amphetamine, heroin, ecstasy, and marijuana. In a short time, the Sinaloa drug empire expanded across 5 continents and nearly 50 countries, becoming the most powerful drug trafficking organization in the world. El Chapo's fortune skyrocketed. Its business was booming, but along with rising wealth and influence came increased attention from the government. Since the bulk of his income came from drug smuggling into the US, he was not only listed as a criminal by the Mexican government, but also became one of the top fugitives wanted by the United States. Once he rose to power, El Chapo had to battle not only the government, but also rival drug cartels in Mexico, who were eyeing his position. Every competitor wanted him dead to expand their own power. In this battle, in 1993, his enemies, the Tijuana cartel, launched an attack against him. They had already killed many of El Chapo's men, and the confrontation this time happened at Guadalajara Airport. El Chapo barely survived the shootout, but a Catholic priest was killed in the crossfire. The death of such a prominent religious figure sparked massive public outrage and forced the government to act. Authorities released images of everyone involved in the shootout, and El Chapo's face was among them. To escape the manhunt, he went into hiding, first fleeing to Tonalá, then, a few days later, hiding in a hotel in Mexico City. He had a trusted associate send $20 million to his family and ensured his staff were financially supported, so the Sinaloa cartel could continue running in his absence. After that, he forged a passport and fled to Guatemala, even bribing a military officer there with $1.2 million for protection. But the entire plan eventually unraveled. On the 9th of June, 1993, led by that very officer, the Guatemalan military captured him and extradited him back to Mexico. For drug trafficking, bribery, and conspiracy charges, he was sentenced to 20 years in. But life inside prison didn't seem to bother El Chapo. He was served gourmet meals, enjoyed entertainment, threw parties, watched television, and even had visits from his wife and girlfriends. Meanwhile, his drug business outside the prison walls continued to run smoothly. He used his wealth to bribe dozens of guards and officials thanks to huge payoffs. He maintained a luxurious lifestyle behind bars and still conducted meetings and managed his growing drug empire. Most notably, the prison's deputy director of security, Damaso Lopez Núñez, also became corrupted. El Chapo gave him everything he asked for: suitcases full of cash, luxury cars, villas, and more. The two soon became close allies. As a result, El Chapo continued to live like a king behind bars. That comfortable prison life lasted until the year 2000, when things started to shift. Due to escalating corruption in the prison system, the government began tightening its control over prison staff and security. By late 2000, his friend Damaso was forced to step down as deputy director. What shocked him even more was that on the 18th of January, 2001, Mexico's Supreme Court approved the extradition of criminals like him to the US. The United States had been requesting his extradition for years. In truth, Mexico had long been the hub of drug trafficking operations. Because it shares a border with the U.S., traffickers constantly smuggled drugs across. Roughly 90% of drugs in America originated from Mexico. The U.S. government spent tens of billions of dollars annually trying to stop this drug flow. Since El Chapo entered the trade, he had controlled most of the supply chain. Some even said no drug could leave Mexico without his approval. This reputation earned him many enemies. America wanted to punish him for poisoning their youth with drugs. After the Supreme Court gave the green light for extraditions, El Chapo quickly began planning his escape. He had no intention of ending up in a U.S. prison. So he spent $2.5 million to bribe more than 70 people involved, including guards, officials, and the prison warden. The entire operation didn't take long. On the 19th of January, 2001, just one day after the court ruling carried out his escape plan, that day, the electronic lock on his cell was deactivated, and all security cameras inside were shut off. El Chapo casually walked out of his cell, climbed into a laundry cart, and a prison guard wheeled him straight to the main gate, where a car awaited to whisk him away. Throughout the escape, his old friend and former deputy prison director Damaso Lopez Núñez, a key accomplice, who later became a major figure in his drug empire. El Chapo's easy prison break was a major embarrassment for the Mexican government. The government immediately took action, arresting all guards involved, including the prison director. After escaping, El Chapo lived freely. He didn't hide. Instead, he expanded the Sinaloa cartel's influence. He met and allied with mafia groups both inside and outside Mexico, rapidly growing his business. He became a drug trafficking mastermind, always staying a few steps ahead of rivals and skillfully avoiding government capture. In addition, his lavish lifestyle drew public attention. He married 4 times, had around 15 children, numerous mistresses, and actively engaged in entertainment activities. To build a favorable image in his community, he also invested in projects for social welfare and charity. This led many to view him as a modern-day Robin Hood, but in truth, his wealth and empire were built on bloodshed and the destruction of thousands of lives. Within just 10 years, his cartel was responsible for around 10,000 deaths. The gang's brutality frightened rivals into retreat, while the Mexican government grew increasingly helpless. In 2006, the Mexican military launched a major crackdown on drug cartels. Many kingpins and gangs were arrested, but El Chapo always managed to escape thanks to prior warnings. His evasion allowed the Sinaloa cartel to control 40 to 60% of Mexico's drug market. Making $3 billion a year, he became the #1 drug lord. In 2009, Forbes ranked him as the 701st richest person in the world. At that time, his net worth was estimated at over $1 billion, most of it from drug trafficking to the U.S. This made the U.S. relentless in their pursuit, hoping to stop the worsening drug crisis at home. As a result, the U.S. placed him on their most wanted list and offered a $500,000 reward for any information leading to his arrest. At the same time, U.S. agencies provided funding and full support to the Mexican government in efforts to capture El Chapo. However, after the escape, he remained on the run for 13 years. Each time the military got close, he slipped away. Even so, many of his associates and bodyguards were arrested during the manhunt. One of them revealed key information that El Chapo would soon meet his ex-wife at a safe house. At the same time, U.S. agencies helped Mexico track the phones of his close associates, monitoring his every move. On the 16th of February, 2014, El Chapo arrived at a safe house to meet his ex-wife. When he turned on his phone to call an associate, authorities immediately pinpointed his location. The Mexican military quickly surrounded the house, but the steel doors delayed their entry. By the time they got inside, El Chapo had escaped through a hidden tunnel beneath the bathroom, but this time, his luck didn't last. After escaping the house, he fled to Mazatlan, where U.S. agents and the Mexican Navy had already set up a base. 5 days later, On the 22nd of February, 2014, the military raided the fourth floor of a hotel. El Chapo was captured on the spot. This time, he had no chance to flee and was officially arrested by the Mexican Navy. After his second capture, he was sent to Mexico's highest security prison, Altiplano. This prison lies 55 miles west of Mexico City, surrounded by concrete walls, razor wire, and guard towers. Guards are stationed 24/7. The airspace above is a no-fly zone, and all communication within several kilometers is cut off. Additionally, the prison has 750 surveillance cameras operating 24 hours a day, and some guards are assigned solely to monitor the screens. In theory, no prisoner could escape, let alone plan an escape. Due to the prison's extreme security, El Chapo was kept under constant watch every second of every day. Both the Mexican people and government felt reassured, but the U.S. still had concerns. The U.S. knew that even with El Chapo behind bars, his drug operation would continue. Drug supply into America wouldn't stop, and most worrisome of all, he might escape again. So, the U.S. demanded that Mexico extradite El Chapo, but the Mexican government refused. Then President Enrique Peña Nieto even declared that Mexico was fully capable of managing its own prisoners. He insisted that El Chapo would never escape again, but the president didn't realize that reality was about to prove him wrong. In fact, from the very first day he was sent to Altiplano, El Chapo began planning another escape. Within just a few days, he had already worked out how to break out of one of the most secure prisons and shared the plan with his closest wife, Emma Coronel. Emma was more than 30 years younger than El Chapo. Despite the significant age gap, the two were highly in sync, and she was deeply involved in his criminal activities. Because of that, he entrusted her with the responsibility of organizing his prison break. To carry out the plan, Emma enlisted the help of El Chapo's 4 sons, along with the former deputy director of the prison, Damaso Lopez Nunez. After being dismissed for corruption, Damaso found himself unemployed and eventually became a member of the drug cartel led by El Chapo. The escape plan was to dig a large tunnel underground, directly connected to the shower area in El Chapo's prison cell, since the cell only had a small private shower. For privacy and security reasons, that shower area was not under camera surveillance, creating a blind spot. Since the cameras couldn't record in that area, the plan was to connect the tunnel to the shower, with the entrance located right inside the cell. To assist with the plan, Emma gave El Chapo a wristwatch during a visitation, which secretly contained a GPS tracking device. Prison guards thought it was just a regular watch and didn't pay it any attention, but it would later become their biggest mistake. Meanwhile, the outside crew sprang into action. They purchased a plot of land 1.5 kilometers from the prison and pretended it was a construction site. From there, they began digging the tunnel. Workers rotated shifts and worked around the clock. The project took months, yet prison officials remained completely unaware. Over the course of nearly a year, El Chapo's team removed approximately 350 truckloads of dirt and completed a tunnel stretching 1 kilometer long and over 1.7 meters in height. The tunnel was fitted with lighting and ventilation systems to ensure airflow and electricity, and even had a motorcycle inside for El Chapo to ride through. At this point, El Chapo had been held at Altiplano for about a year and a half. The government believed he'd be imprisoned there for life in Mexico's most secure facility. But on the 11th of July, 2015, that illusion of security was shattered. In front of the whole world, El Chapo escaped once again. That night, he began pacing his cell, repeatedly walking to and from the shower area, as if waiting for a signal to flee. Since the shower was in a camera blind spot, guards had no idea what was happening. Around 9 p.m., El Chapo walked into the shower and this time didn't return. 25 minutes passed, and he still hadn't come out. The guards grew suspicious, opened the cell door, and stepped into the shower area. What they saw left them stunned. On the floor was a hole about 50 centimeters wide, with a tunnel a few meters below and a ladder leading down. The guards climbed down and discovered a tunnel stretching approximately 1 kilometer. It ended at the construction site El Chapo's team had purchased. The fences surrounding Altiplano, thousands of guards, hundreds of surveillance cameras, running 24/7, all of it became a joke. El Chapo had pulled off another escape. This incident humiliated the Mexican government, especially President Peña Nieto. Mexico's international reputation took a serious blow, and the U.S. harshly criticized the Mexican authorities. In response, the Mexican government launched a major investigation, severely disciplining many prison guards at Altiplano suspected of assisting in the escape. Then, in an effort to recapture El Chapo, the government deployed the military to lock down areas across the country and offered a 60 million peso reward for information. Even so, months passed with no sign of El Chapo. The Mexican military coordinated with the world's top law enforcement agencies to hunt him down. But in a surprising twist, while the world was searching for him, in October 2015, he agreed to an interview with Hollywood actor Sean Penn. In that interview, he boldly claimed to be the biggest drug trafficker in the world, but fate was catching up with him. His days of freedom were numbered. The Mexican Navy, Army, and federal police dedicated themselves to the search, working tirelessly day and night. On the 8th of January, 2016, the police received a credible tip and immediately raided a house in Los Mochis, Nayarit. Inside were El Chapo and several of his men. To block the police, his associates opened fire, and the police returned fire with equal intensity. During the shootout, 5 of El Chapo's men were killed. This gave him just enough time to escape through a secret tunnel. After emerging, he stole a vehicle and attempted to flee, but this time, luck wasn't on his side. As he drove about 20 kilometers south of Los Mochis, he was surrounded on all sides by the military. He tried to bribe the soldiers, but they weren't corrupt. They refused the offer and arrested him on the spot. El Chapo was temporarily held at Altiplano, the very prison he had tunneled out of before. His gang still tried to dig another tunnel to break him out, but the situation had changed. The Mexican government decided to extradite him to the United States. After being held for some time, in 2017, El Chapo was extradited to the U.S. This was what he feared most, falling into American hands. In a federal court in New York, he faced a trial that lasted for months. Throughout the proceedings, extreme security measures were enforced. Every vehicle transfer shut down entire roadways, with helicopters providing overhead surveillance. The U.S. was determined not to let him escape again. In 2019, the federal court found El Chapo guilty on all 10 criminal charges, including drug trafficking, smuggling, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. He was sentenced to life in prison and fined $12 billion. Today, the world's most notorious drug lord, the King of Tunnels, is serving a life sentence in a U.S. supermax prison. Every day, U.S. authorities continue to receive reports about the possibility of another escape, always wary that this cunning criminal might find a new way out. But for now, he remains tightly locked inside the legal cage. El Chapo's escape saga is considered a legendary event in global criminal history too. Escapes from maximum security prisons not only exposed Mexico's prison system's corruption and loopholes, but also highlighted the extraordinary planning and execution capabilities of him and his crew. His story is more than the rise and fall of a drug kingpin. It's a deep reflection on law, power, and the dark side of human nature, becoming a classic case study in criminology and sociology.